The woman with an empty cradle. In the heart of a village nestled by the edge of a sprawling forest, there lived a woman named Nia. She was known far and wide for her beauty, her gentle heart, and the kindness she offered to all who crossed her path. Her laughter was like a song that carried through the winds, and her smile could brighten even the darkest corners of her home. Her husband, Obadiah, a humble and hardworking farmer, loved her with all his heart, but despite their many years of marriage, there was one thing they both yearned for more than anything: a child. Every day, Nia and Obadiah would wake before the sun, their hands intertwined, as they ventured to the fields together. Nia would tend to the gardens, planting flowers that bloomed in vibrant reds and yellows, while Obadiah walked the land, planting crops for the village. Yet, no matter how busy their lives were, there was always an emptiness in Nia's heart. The cradle in her home remained empty, and every corner of their house seemed to echo with the silence of an unfulfilled wish. Nia longed for the day when she would hear the patter of small feet running across the floor, when she would hold a tiny hand in hers, feeling the warmth of life that only a child could bring. But as the years passed, the day never came. The sorrow was not just in her heart, it was in her every breath. She would watch as the other women of the village cradled their children, their faces glowing with joy as their little ones giggled and played. And with each passing moment, Nia's heart grew heavier. "When will it be our turn, Obadiah?" she would whisper into the quiet night, her eyes tracing the stars that seemed so far beyond her reach. Obadiah would take her hand in his eyes full of love and understanding. "We must be patient, Nia. Our time will come," he would say, though his voice was tinged with uncertainty. He, too, felt the ache of their empty cradle, but he refused to let the sadness break their bond. He believed in faith, in patience, and in the love that he knew would one day fill their home. But as the years turned into a decade, the whispers of the village grew louder. Nia, once admired for her beauty and grace, became the subject of hushed conversations behind closed doors. They spoke of how she had not borne a child after so many years of marriage. They said that perhaps she was cursed, that there was something wrong with her, some flaw that kept her from becoming a mother. The other women would glance at her as they passed, their faces masked with false pity, as if they too wondered what was wrong with Nia. Some would even murmur that she had surely angered the spirits of the land, that her infertility was punishment for some transgression long forgotten. Nia would hear these whispers, and with each one, her heart would sink deeper. She tried to smile through the pain, tried to show the world that she was unaffected, but the truth was that every taunt, every glance, felt like a dagger to her soul. She loved her husband with all her heart, but she could not help but feel that she had failed him. She was supposed to give him a child, to continue their family line, yet all she had was an empty womb. One day, as she sat on the edge of the garden, watching the children play under the sun, a deep sob filled her chest. She longed for the days when she could join in their laughter, when her own child would play in the grass beside her. Instead, she sat alone, her hands clenched in her lap, as tears quietly fell from her eyes. "Why must it be this way?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. It was then that a woman from the village approached her. The woman, old and bent with age, had been known for her connection to the spiritual realm. Her name was Mama Awa, and she was said to possess knowledge of remedies for ailments both physical and spiritual. Mama Awa knelt beside Nia, her eyes kind but sharp. "I know the pain you carry, child," she said softly. "There is a remedy, but it comes at a cost." Nia looked up, her heart fluttering with both hope and fear. "What do you mean, Mama Awa?" The old woman's voice dropped to a whisper. "There is a priest who lives deep in the forest. His name is Baba Oran. He has the power to grant the deepest of wishes, but beware, for his magic is not without a price." Nia's heart raced. Could this be the answer she had longed for? Could Baba Oran truly give her the child she so desperately desired? What price? She asked, her voice barely audible. Mama Awa's eyes darkened, and she looked over her shoulder as if to ensure no one else could hear. He will ask for something in return. Something precious to you. But if you are willing to pay, he will grant your wish. Nia's mind raced. She had nothing to lose. Her heart had been broken time and again by the empty cradle. She had tried everything, prayers, offerings, hopes, but nothing had worked. Perhaps this was the answer. Perhaps Baba Oran could give her what she so desperately needed. With trembling hands, she stood up and looked at Mama Awa. Where can I find him? She asked, determination rising in her voice. Mama Awa gave a faint smile. Follow the path beyond the river. Do not stray from it, and it will lead you to Baba Oran. But remember, child, the price you pay may not be something you can give back. With her heart pounding, Nia set off the next morning, leaving Obadil behind with a simple promise that she would return soon. The journey was long, and the forest seemed to close in around her as she walked deeper into the unknown. But her determination burned bright, and she knew she had to do whatever it took to bring a child into their lives. After hours of walking, Nia found herself standing before a small hut, hidden among the thick trees. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and incense. She took a deep breath and entered the hut. Inside, an old man sat at a wooden table, his eyes glimmering with knowledge beyond the years of this world. His name was Baba Oran, and he regarded Nia with a gaze that seemed to pierce through her very soul. I know why you've come, Baba Oran said, his voice low and steady. You seek a child. Nia nodded, her voice caught in her throat. Please, I need a child. I have nothing left to give. I will do anything. Baba Oran's smile was enigmatic. Anything, you say? He reached into the folds of his robes and pulled out a small, delicate ring. It shimmered in the dim light, glowing with a strange energy. This is the ring that will bind your fate. Wear it, and you will have a child. But remember, never lose it. For the price of this gift is one you may not be able to repay. Nia took the ring, her hands trembling as she slid it onto her finger. She could feel its power, its promise, coursing through her. I accept, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Baba Oran nodded. Then go. Your wish will soon be granted. Nia left the hut, the weight of the ring on her finger heavier than she could have ever imagined. As she walked back through the forest, she felt a surge of hope, but deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that this hope may come with a cost that she was not yet prepared to pay. As Nia returned home to Obadil, her heart filled with both excitement and dread. Little did she know that the path she had chosen would lead her to a fate far beyond what she could ever have anticipated. The birth of a blessed yet cursed child. Nia could feel it from the moment she returned home, the warmth in her heart, the renewed sense of hope that blossomed within her as soon as the ring slipped onto her finger. The days felt brighter, and the air seemed to hum with a subtle magic. She was filled with an eager anticipation that she had not known for years. But, little did she know, this warmth would soon transform into an overwhelming storm, one that would test the boundaries of her love and faith. Soon after Nia's visit to Baba Oran, her body began to change. The strange, vivid hope within her seemed to manifest physically, as if the universe itself had acknowledged her desperate plea. Nia grew more radiant, her face glowing with a softness she had not seen in years. Her heartbeat quickened, the life within her stirring to life with every passing day. Obadil could hardly believe his eyes when he saw the change in his wife. She was as vibrant as the flowers in their garden, and her joy was infectious. They had waited for so long, and now it was finally happening. Nia was pregnant. They whispered about it every night before sleep took them, sharing the joy of the new life they had created together. As the months passed, Nia's belly swelled with life, her anticipation growing alongside it. She could feel the baby inside her, stirring, kicking, responding to her touch. Each movement felt like a promise, a beautiful reminder of the hope she had longed for. The village, once full of whispers about her barrenness, now celebrated her pregnancy. The women gathered at Nia's house to bring gifts, woven baskets, hand-carved wooden toys, blankets for the baby. They sang songs of praise, calling Nia the blessed one, the woman who would bring forth new life. Yet Nia couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about this child. There was a peculiar energy around her, an intensity that made the air hum. And then, one morning, the long-awaited day arrived. Nia woke to find herself bathed in a glow that filled the room. The sun, breaking through the trees, cast long, warm beams across the floor. Her labor pains began, but there was no fear in her heart, just the quiet certainty that soon she would meet her child, the one she had prayed for. When the time finally came, Nia held her baby girl in her arms. She was everything Nia had ever dreamed of, a perfect, beautiful child. Her skin was the color of rich, dark earth, her hair as black as the midnight sky. But what caught Nia's eye most were her eyes, golden, radiant, like the sun itself. They shone with an otherworldly light, as if the child had been kissed by the heavens. "Her name is Zola," Nia whispered, tears of joy mingling with the sweat on her forehead. "Zola, the gift I have longed for." Obodil gazed down at his daughter, his heart swelling with pride. "She is perfect, Nia. She is our blessing, our miracle." But even as they marveled at their daughter's beauty, there was an unease that lingered in the air. As the days passed, strange things began to happen. It started with small occurrences. Zola's laugh seemed to echo in a way that was impossible for a baby so young. Then, one morning, as Nia cradled Zola in her arms, she noticed something even stranger. The animals around their home, birds, squirrels, and even the wild goats that roamed the hills, had begun to gather around her house. They sat in silence, watching Zola with unblinking eyes. Nia had always known that animals were drawn to her, but now, they weren't just curious, they were reverent. They bowed their heads as though honoring her. The plants in her garden, too, seemed to respond to Zola's presence. Flowers bloomed in a riot of colors, their petals opening at the mere touch of Zola's small hands. It was as if the earth itself had been touched by something divine, and Nia could not help but wonder if this was the magic Baba Oran had promised her. As the weeks passed, Zola's influence only seemed to grow stronger. The other villagers began to take notice of her radiant beauty and the strange happenings that surrounded her. They spoke in hushed tones, both in awe and fear of the child. "This is no ordinary baby," they would say. "She is blessed, but there is something strange about her." Some of the elders spoke of ancient prophecies, tales passed down from generations that spoke of a child with golden eyes, a child who would change the fate of the land. But others, more superstitious, whispered darker thoughts. "She is not of this world," they would murmur. "The spirits must have sent her as a sign. Or perhaps she is a curse, a harbinger of something terrible." Nia could feel the weight of their eyes on her and Zola. There was admiration, yes, but there was also a deep, unspoken fear. The same villagers who had once brought her gifts now looked at her with caution, as if they feared Zola's power. At night, when the moon rose high in the sky, Nia would sit by the window, holding Zola close to her chest, feeling the warmth of her daughter's breath. As she gazed down at the child, she could see the ring Baba Oran had given her, a small, simple band on her finger. She had not taken it off since the day it had been placed there. In the beginning, it had seemed like nothing more than a symbol of the miracle she had been granted. But now, she could feel something else, a growing energy within it. As Zola slept soundly in her arms, Nia's eyes fell upon the ring. She noticed that its glow had intensified, as if it were reacting to the presence of her daughter. The ring now shimmered in the dim light of the room, casting faint patterns on the walls. It pulsed with an ancient, otherworldly energy, reminding her of the price she had agreed to pay. She wondered, briefly, if it was this very energy that had caused the animals to bow to Zola, and if it was the same energy that caused the flowers to bloom in her wake. Was this magic truly a gift, or was it a curse that she would soon regret? The thought of the curse crossed Nia's mind more often than she cared to admit. She had not forgotten Baba Oran's warning that the price of the child would not be easy to pay. But the love she felt for Zola, the joy of seeing her little one's face light up with the simplest smile, made it hard to imagine that there could be anything wrong with this perfect child. Zola's influence spread beyond the borders of their home. The villagers began to take notice of her, whispering to one another about the child who could command nature, whose presence brought forth life from the earth itself. Yet, not all who saw her were moved by awe. Some looked at her with fear, wondering what this extraordinary child meant for their world. Was she a blessing, or was she a portent of something darker on the horizon? Days turned into weeks, and Nia and Obodil continued to care for their daughter with all the love they had. But Nia couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. The ring on her finger grew warmer with each passing day, and Zola's presence seemed to grow even more powerful. There were whispers in the village about the magic, about the child, and about the mother who had brought this strange power into their midst. Nia continued to clutch the ring, feeling its pulse beneath her skin. She had no idea what the future would hold, but as she looked into her daughter's golden eyes, she knew one thing for sure: this was her gift, and she would protect Zola at all costs, no matter the price. The curse awakens. It was a beautiful day when the unthinkable happened, a day that began like any other, with the warmth of the sun rising over the fields, the smell of damp earth in the air, and the gentle hum of the wind as it blew through the tall grass. Nia had woken early, as she always did, to prepare breakfast for her family. She smiled as she watched Zola, now a toddler, playing in the garden, her golden eyes sparkling with wonder as she picked flowers and chased butterflies. Obodil had already left for the fields, his strong hands eager to walk the land they had walked together for so many years. The life Nia had always dreamed of, one filled with love, laughter, and the joy of motherhood, seemed perfect. Yet, in the back of her mind, the nagging feeling that something was amiss refused to leave her. The magic that surrounded Zola, the strange things that had been happening since her birth, lingered in the corners of her mind. The animals that bowed to her daughter, the plants that bloomed in her wake, the way the villagers had begun to look at them with a mixture of awe and fear, it all felt like something more than just a blessing. But still, Nia pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on her daughter, on her family, on the simple joys of life. It was on this seemingly perfect day, however, that Nia's world would shatter. As she walked in the garden, her hands trembling as she planted seeds in the earth, she felt a sudden wave of dizziness wash over her. At first, she dismissed it as nothing more than exhaustion, a result of the long hours she had been walking. But then it happened again, this time more forcefully. A sharp pain shot through her chest, and her vision blurred. She staggered backward, clutching her chest as the ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Her breath quickened, and her heart raced as if it were trying to escape her body. Before she could even cry out for help, Nia collapsed onto the ground, the world fading to black. When she regained consciousness, Nia was lying in the soft grass, the air cool against her skin. Her head throbbed, and her limbs felt strangely heavy. She tried to sit up, but something was wrong, so terribly wrong. As she tried to move, a strange tingling sensation spread through her body, from the tips of her fingers to the soles of her feet. It was as if her very skin was alive, buzzing with energy. She reached up to touch her face, but her hands felt different, larger, longer, colder. Her pulse quickened as she looked down at herself, and to her horror, she saw that her hands were no longer human. They had transformed into something else, something monstrous. Her arms had lengthened and turned into smooth, scaled limbs, and her once soft skin had become sleek and iridescent. Her body had contorted into a shape she could not recognize, a giant serpent, her long tail curled around her like a coil, her body shining with the same eerie golden glow that had surrounded Zola since her birth. She tried to scream, but the sound that emerged from her mouth was not human. It was a hiss, a sound that sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to move, to stand, but her new form was unwieldy. She slithered across the grass, her heart pounding in her chest as she realized the full extent of what had happened to her. She had become a creature, a monster. A curse had taken hold of her, transforming her into something she could not understand. She had no words for what she felt, only a deep, overwhelming terror. No. This can't be real, Nia thought, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of what had happened. Her body trembled with shock, and a deep grief washed over her. She had lost everything, her humanity, her identity, her connection to the world she had known. She was no longer near the woman, near the mother, near the wife. She was something else entirely. Overcome with the weight of her transformation, Nia struggled to slither her way into the thick forest nearby, where the shadows would hide her from the world. She needed to escape from the villagers, escape from her family, escape from the life she had once known. She couldn't bear the thought of Obadiah seeing her like this, nor could she face Zola, whose golden eyes might now be the only connection to the woman she used to be. Nia didn't want them to see her in this form, and she didn't want to be a part of their lives anymore. So she hid. Deep within the forbidden forest, Nia curled herself into a tight coil beneath the twisted branches of ancient trees. The darkness around her felt familiar, like the shadows were her only companions now. She cried for what she had lost, for the life she could never return to, for the curse that had stolen everything from her. Her tears fell silently, mixing with the earth beneath her. Meanwhile, back at the house, Obadiah was frantic. He had returned from the fields to find Nia gone, her basket and tools left behind in the garden. He called out for her, his voice growing desperate with every passing minute. "Nia," he cried. "Where are you? Please, answer me." He searched the house, the garden, the fields, every place they had ever been. There was no sign of her. No trace of where she had gone. His heart ached as he realized that something was terribly wrong. Nia would never just leave without a word. Something had happened to her. Something he couldn't understand. He ran to the neighbors, asking if they had seen her, but no one had. The entire village searched for her, but the only thing they found were her abandoned tools and the strange, unsettling silence that now hung over their home. As the days passed and Nia's absence became more pronounced, the villagers began to speculate, whispers spread like wildfire. Some said she had run away. Others said she had been taken by evil spirits. But no one knew the truth. In the midst of the growing panic, Zola, still a little girl, began to sense something strange. Though she was too young to understand the full depth of what had happened, she could feel her mother's presence. Felt it like a faint whisper on the wind. It was as though her mother's spirit had not truly left her, as though Nia's essence still lingered in the world, watching over her. Zola would often wander to the edges of the garden, staring into the forest as if she could see something moving in the shadows. She felt a strange pull, a deep, aching connection to something hidden just beyond her reach. She would sometimes speak to the trees, calling for her mother as if she knew that Nia was still there, somewhere, watching her. "Mama," she would say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're out there. Come back to me." But Nia could not return. She had lost herself to the curse, her human form lost forever to the darkness. Zola's cries went unanswered, and though Nia could hear them in the depth of the forest, she could not bring herself to show herself to her daughter. The grief was too much, too overwhelming. The child she had prayed for, the one she had given everything for, now lived a life without her. As the days turned into weeks, the search for Nia continued. Obodil never gave up hope, his heart still believing that one day, somehow, Nia would return to him. But the forest held its secrets, and the answers were hidden beneath layers of magic and sorrow. What had been done to Nia could not easily be undone. And so, Nia remained hidden in the forest, grieving the loss of everything she had once held dear, her family, her life, her humanity. Her mother's hidden watchful eyes. The years passed slowly, stretching on like a never-ending river, each day blending into the next as Nia lay hidden in the depths of the forbidden forest. Her transformation into a serpent, though painful and sorrowful, had become a part of her existence. No longer did she feel the weight of her human body, nor the tender touch of the earth beneath her feet. Now, her world was one of scales and silence, the shifting shadows of the trees her only companions. Nia did not know how long she had been in this form, but time had lost its meaning. What she knew, more than anything else, was that her heart, though changed, still beat for one thing, Zola. She watched her daughter from the shadows, always a distance away, never allowing Zola to see her. Every night, as the moon climbed high in the sky, Nia would slip through the underbrush, slithering silently along the edges of the village and the fields, her eyes trained on the child she had once cradled in her arms. Zola was growing into the beautiful, strong girl that Nia had always known she would become. Her golden eyes, inherited from Nia, glistened in the light of day, and her movements were filled with grace and confidence, as though the earth itself was at her command. But despite her strength, Zola was never truly alone. Nia was always there, lurking just out of sight, a silent guardian watching over her daughter. Zola had always felt the presence of something. Something she couldn't explain, something that made her feel as if she was constantly being watched. As a young girl, she had often tried to shake off the feeling, brushing it aside as the product of her own imagination. But as she grew older, the feeling did not go away. In fact, it only intensified, like a shadow that followed her wherever she went. At first, Zola thought it might be a guardian spirit, perhaps the spirit of the land itself, always near to guide and protect her. The villagers often spoke of spirits, of ancestors watching over their descendants, and Zola, with her deep connection to the earth and the natural world, had no reason to doubt that a benevolent force was watching her. But as time went on, the sense of being watched became more pronounced, more unsettling. She would glance over her shoulder when walking alone through the forest, but there would be no one there. The feeling of eyes on her would vanish as quickly as it came, leaving her with nothing but a cold shiver down her spine. One afternoon, Zola wandered to the river that ran through the village. It was a place she often visited to collect water and to reflect. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows on the shimmering surface of the water. She had a golden bracelet, one of the few gifts she had ever received as a child, which had been passed down from her mother. She loved it dearly, and it had become a symbol of the bond she had with the mother she barely remembered. But today, as Zola bent down to collect some water, the bracelet slipped from her wrist and fell into the river, disappearing beneath the surface. Zola gasped in shock, her heart racing as she watched the bracelet float away, carried by the current. She reached for it, her fingers brushing the water's surface, but it was out of her reach. Without thinking, she stepped further into the water, determined to retrieve the precious gift. As her hand reached deeper into the cold water, something caught her eye, a faint glimmer beneath the surface. She squinted, her heart skipping a beat as she saw two glowing eyes staring back at her, eyes that shone with an unnatural light. The eyes were like twin suns, golden, radiant, and so familiar that her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, Zola froze. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The eyes were mesmerizing, hypnotic, and for some reason, she felt drawn to them, as if they were calling her. Then, as if waking from a trance, panic surged through her. She recognized those eyes, they were the same as hers. But who, or what, was looking back at her? Her heart raced as her instinct screamed at her to run. She pulled her hand back from the water, stumbling backward, her feet slipping on the rocks. The eyes remained fixed on her, unblinking, as if they were part of the river itself. Terrified, Zola turned and fled, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't look back, not even for a second, too afraid of what she had seen. As she ran through the forest, the sense of being watched grew even stronger, and she felt as though something, or someone, was following her. The feeling of dread gripped her tightly, but she kept running, her legs moving faster than she had ever run before, as if the eyes in the river had somehow cast a shadow over her soul. As Zola reached the safety of her home, breathless and trembling, she stopped to catch her breath. Her golden eyes darted around the familiar surroundings, but there was no sign of the eyes that had haunted her by the river. Still, the fear didn't subside. Her mind raced, her thoughts a tangled mess of confusion and terror. Who had she seen in the river? What was that thing? And why did those eyes feel so familiar? She didn't tell anyone about what had happened. The villagers, already wary of her strange connection to the earth, would surely think she was losing her mind. But the memory of those glowing eyes haunted her, pulling at her thoughts like a thread she couldn't untangle. Unknown to Zola, Nia had watched the entire event unfold from the shadows. She had been following her daughter for years, unseen, protecting her from afar. As Zola had reached out to retrieve the bracelet, Nia had been there, lurking beneath the surface of the river, waiting. And when her daughter had looked into the water, her golden eyes meeting Nia's, a moment of connection had passed between them. But Nia knew that Zola could not see her, could not know her. If she did, the secret of her transformation, her curse, would be exposed. Nia could never let that happen. She couldn't risk Zola seeing her as the serpent she had become, nor could she bear the thought of Zola rejecting her. So, she stayed hidden, a silent protector, watching from the shadows. Days passed, and the encounter at the river began to fade from Zola's mind, though she could never quite shake the feeling that something had changed. She still felt the presence of the mysterious guardian, the feeling that she was never truly alone. But as time went on, she learned to live with it, accepting it as part of her life. The villagers, too, had started to accept Zola's strange aura. They spoke in hushed voices about her, calling her the chosen one, the girl who had been blessed by the spirits. Some of the elders believed she was a reincarnation of an ancient protector, while others simply marveled at the power that seemed to radiate from her. But despite the admiration, there was always an underlying current of fear. No one knew the full extent of Zola's power, and no one dared to question the strange events that seemed to follow her wherever she went. And so, Zola grew up, strong and beautiful, loved by many but always haunted by a sense of longing. She never knew her mother, never understood the connection she felt to the world around her, but she would always carry the knowledge, the sensation, that something, or someone, was watching over her. And as for Nia, still a serpent in the shadows, she continued her vigil, ever watchful, ever loving, waiting for the day when she could reveal herself to her daughter, when the curse would finally be broken. Until then, she would remain hidden in the depths of the forest, a silent guardian, forever watching from the shadows. A fateful encounter. The years had passed, and Zola had grown into a young woman. She was no longer the carefree child chasing butterflies in the meadow, nor the girl who played by the river with her golden bracelet. Now, as a teenager, she had become more introspective, and the mysteries of her life weighed heavily on her mind. She had always known there was something different about her, something that set her apart from the other villagers. But the more she grew, the more the questions began to surface, questions that had remained buried in the shadows of her childhood. Zola's golden eyes, like twin suns, continued to glow with an otherworldly brilliance. She was admired by many, both for her beauty and the quiet power that seemed to radiate from her. The villagers whispered that she was a child of the spirits, chosen to protect the land. But Zola felt that these explanations didn't quite capture the truth. There was something more. She could feel it in her bones, in her heart. Why had the animals always been drawn to her? Why did the plants grow and bloom in her presence? And why, more than anything else, did she feel as though she were being watched? It was as if an invisible force was always near, guiding her, protecting her, always just out of sight. She had often felt this presence, like a shadow trailing behind her, but never fully understood it. The presence had always been there, especially in times of danger. When she was a child, whenever she found herself in trouble, a serpent would appear out of nowhere, driving away danger and guiding her back to safety. At first, she had been terrified of the snake, believing it to be a creature of the wild, but over time, she had come to accept its presence. It seemed to protect her, like a silent guardian. And yet, the more she saw it, the more she wondered, who or what was this snake? And why did it appear only when she needed help? One crisp morning, as the sun rose over the village, Zola decided that she could no longer live in ignorance. She would find the serpent. She would seek out the creature that had followed her all these years, and she would uncover the truth. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something deeply personal, about the serpent's appearance. Zola gathered her courage and slipped out of her house, making her way toward the forest. Her heart raced as she stepped into the cool, shadowed woods, the trees towering above her like ancient sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of moss and earth, and the sound of birds chirping filled the quiet spaces between her footsteps. The forest, which had once felt like a place of comfort and familiarity, now seemed to hold an air of mystery. Zola had ventured into it many times before, but this was different. She was no longer just a child exploring the woods, now, she was a young woman on a mission to confront the unknown. The deeper she went into the forest, the more she could feel the presence of the serpent. It was as though the very air around her grew heavier, charged with a strange energy. Zola stopped in her tracks, her heart beating faster. There, in the distance, she saw a flicker of movement, a long, sinuous shape, slithering through the underbrush, the serpent. Zola took a step forward, her breath catching in her throat. The serpent was always there, but this time, she was determined to approach it. She wasn't afraid. Instead, a strange sense of calm washed over her as she walked toward the creature. She knew this moment was important, that it was the key to unlocking the mysteries that had haunted her all her life. As she drew closer, she saw the serpent clearly, a massive creature, its scales glistening like liquid gold, its eyes glowing with an intense, otherworldly light. It was the same serpent that had appeared to her all those times in the past, the same creature that had protected her. But now, seeing it in its full grandeur, Zola felt no fear. Instead, she felt an inexplicable connection, like a magnetic pull that drew her to it. The serpent paused, as if sensing her presence, and turned its massive head toward her. For a long moment, the two of them simply stared at each other. Zola's heart thudded in her chest, her golden eyes locked onto the creature's. She could feel a powerful energy emanating from the serpent, a magic that seemed to course through the air itself. And in that moment, she knew with a certainty that she could not explain, that this creature, this serpent, was more than just a guardian. This was something personal. Something tied to her very being. Without thinking, Zola took a step forward. She reached out her hand, her fingers trembling slightly, and extended it toward the serpent. She had no idea what she was doing, only that it felt right, as though some deep, primal instinct was guiding her actions. The serpent hesitated for a moment, its large golden eyes fixed on her, before it slowly, almost cautiously, moved forward. Zola's heart skipped a beat as the serpent's massive head lowered, coming within inches of her outstretched hand. The creature's scales shimmered in the dappled sunlight, and its breath was warm against her skin. For a moment, they were frozen in time, woman and serpent, connected by an invisible thread. Then, with a softness that belied its massive size, the serpent touched her hand with the tip of its head. The contact sent a shockwave of energy through Zola's body, a rush of ancient magic that seemed to stir something deep within her. She felt the ground beneath her feet shift, as if the earth itself had come alive, responding to the touch. The magic surged through her veins, and for the first time in her life, Zola felt a deep, visceral connection to the world around her. She looked into the serpent's eyes and felt her heart swell with emotion. Something inside her stirred, something she had buried deep for so long. She knew, now more than ever, that this was not just a random creature. This was part of her. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered softly, barely above a breath, "You feel familiar, who are you?" The serpent's golden eyes shimmered as if it was trying to find the words, as if it was searching for a way to communicate. And then, after what felt like an eternity, the creature spoke. But the voice that emerged was not a hiss, it was a voice filled with sorrow, filled with an ancient pain that echoed through the very air around them. "Mother." Zola's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mother," she repeated, her voice shaking with disbelief. "What do you mean? You are my mother." The serpent did not answer with words, but its eyes held the truth, something that Zola had always known deep within her soul. This creature, this serpent, was no ordinary guardian. It was her mother, the very same woman who had brought her into this world, the woman she had never known, but who had always been there, watching over her, protecting her from the shadows. Zola's mind reeled as the realization sank in. The curse. The magic. The golden eyes she had inherited. They were all connected, tied to the serpent, to the woman who had once been human and who now existed in this cursed form. The pain, the loss, the years of separation, all of it came rushing back to Zola in a wave of overwhelming emotion. She reached out once again, her fingers trembling as she touched the serpent's head. "Mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. I never knew you were here. I didn't know." The serpent's eyes softened, a flicker of recognition passing through them. It was a moment of deep connection, of understanding, of loss, and of love. In that moment, both mother and daughter knew that they were no longer bound by the curse. They were finally together, no longer separated by the vast chasm of time and magic that had kept them apart. But though their reunion was bittersweet, it was also a beginning. A beginning of healing. A beginning of redemption, the curse broken. Zola stood frozen in the clearing, the realization of what had just transpired hitting her like a wave. The serpent, the creature she had felt connected to for years, had revealed its true identity. It was her mother, Nia, the woman who had disappeared when she was just a child, the woman whose absence had haunted her every moment of her life. Now, standing before her in this cursed form, Nia's deep sorrow radiated through her golden eyes, a sorrow that Zola could feel in the very marrow of her bones. But as much as the revelation stunned her, Zola didn't run. She didn't flee in fear or confusion. Instead, she stood tall, her heart racing, her mind swirling with 1,000 questions. "You are my mother," Zola whispered, still struggling to believe it, even though her heart knew it was true. But how? Why? The serpent, Nia, did not answer immediately. She simply stared at her daughter with those same golden eyes that reflected her own. There was a deep sadness there, a weight that only years of separation, of a life lost, could create. Nia's massive head lowered slightly, a gesture of grief, as though she herself did not know how to begin the story. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Nia's voice echoed through the air. It was soft, tremulous, filled with emotion, and yet it carried the weight of centuries of sorrow. I was cursed, Zola. The price of your birth was steep. I made a terrible bargain, one I should never have agreed to. And for that I lost everything, including you. Zola's breath caught in her throat as the serpent's words began to sink in. The pieces of her past, the strange occurrences in her childhood, the bond she had felt with the serpent, the mystery surrounding her mother's disappearance, suddenly began to make sense. But even as the truth started to settle, a storm of questions erupted in Zola's mind. A bargain, she asked, her voice shaking. What kind of bargain? What did you lose? What happened to you? The serpent's eyes closed briefly, as though she was gathering the strength to speak of the past. Nia sighed, the sound like a whisper of wind rustling through the trees, carrying the weight of years lost. I went to a priest, Nia said, her voice quivering with sorrow. Baba Oran. He promised me that he could give me the child I so desperately longed for. I was barren, and my heart was breaking. But I couldn't have a child, not without his help. He gave me a sacred ring, and with it, I conceived you. Zola's mind raced. But the ring, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come back? Nia's expression darkened, her gaze distant. The ring, it was not just a gift, Zola. It was a binding. I didn't know what I was agreeing to. The price was steep, but I was blinded by my desire to have a child. And when I received it, when I held you in my arms, I felt the price I had paid. She paused, the pain clear in her voice. I transformed. The magic bound me, changed me, and I lost my humanity. I became the serpent you see now. My curse was to live in this form, unable to return to you, unable to be the mother I wanted to be. Zola's heart pounded in her chest as the weight of the truth settled on her. Her mother had been cursed for her own existence. And that curse had kept them apart for so long. She wanted to scream in frustration, but instead, her voice was steady, though filled with determination. Then we must break the curse. Nia looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear. I've tried, Zola. There is no way to undo what has been done. The magic is too powerful. The ring that Baba Oran gave me, it is the key, but it's been lost for years. Without it, there is no way to break the curse. Zola's eyes widened. The sacred ring. She had seen it glow with a strange energy when she was a child, felt its magic before. It was no longer on her mother's finger, it was gone. The realization hit Zola with a force she hadn't expected. The key to breaking the curse had been lost, and without it, she would never be able to free her mother. But then, Zola's resolve hardened. She had come this far, uncovered the truth that had been hidden from her for so long. She would not stop now. I will find the ring, she declared, her voice full of fire. I will find Baba Oran and make him tell me the truth. I will break this curse, no matter what it takes. Nia's golden eyes filled with sorrow, but there was a flicker of something else, something like hope. She had been resigned to the curse for so long, but Zola's fierce determination rekindled a flame she had long since believed extinguished. Zola, you must be careful. Baba Oran is not a man to be trusted. The magic that binds me is ancient. It will not be easily undone. And the ring, once lost, it may be gone forever. Zola's gaze was unwavering. I don't care. I will find it. I will bring it back. And when I do, we will be free. Nia could only nod, her serpent's body coiling with emotion. She watched as Zola turned to leave, her golden eyes filled with a mixture of love and fear. You are strong, my daughter, Nia whispered. Stronger than I ever was. You will find the truth. And when you do, we will be free. The journey to find Baba Oran was not an easy one. Zola traveled for days, her heart set on confronting the old priest who had caused her mother suffering. The landscape grew more treacherous the deeper she ventured into the land, the path winding through dense forest, across rushing rivers, and over rocky hills. The farther she went, the more determined she became, each step forward fueled by the love for her mother and the desire to see her freed from the curse that bound her. At last, Zola reached the old temple where Baba Oran had once resided. It was a place shrouded in mystery, hidden deep in the heart of the mountains. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and incense, and the very walls of the temple seemed to hum with ancient power. As Zola entered, she found herself standing in a large, dimly lit chamber, the shadows stretching across the stone floor. Sitting at the far end of the chamber was Baba Oran, his frail body hunched with age, his once sharp eyes now dull with fear. He looked up as Zola approached, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "You," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You are the one, the daughter." Zola's voice was icy. "I've come for answers, Baba Oran. You gave my mother a cursed gift, and I want you to tell me how to break it." The old priest's hands trembled as he clasped them together, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "The ring, it is the key," he muttered. "But the magic is not so simple. It binds not only your mother, but the very fabric of the spirits themselves. To undo it is to unravel the world of the dead, the world of the living. You cannot just break it." Zola stepped forward, her gaze hardening. "Tell me what I need to do. I will find the ring. I will bring it back. You will help me break the curse, or I will make sure you never harm another soul again." Baba Oran cowered before her, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. "The ring was meant to be lost," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Once it was given, once the bargain was made, it became part of the spirit's realm. Only you, born of that magic, can retrieve it. Only you can break the curse." Zola felt the fire of determination burn hotter in her chest. She had everything she needed, she had the truth, she had the knowledge, and she had the will to set things right. "Then I will find it." With a final look at Baba Oran, Zola turned and left the temple. The journey was not over. The final act had yet to come, but Zola knew this one thing with all her heart: nothing, not even the darkest magic, could stand in her way. Rebirth and redemption. The river, its waters glimmering with an ethereal glow, seemed to stretch endlessly before Zola as she approached. The journey had been long, the path treacherous, and the weight of the world had rested heavily on her shoulders. But now, standing at the banks of the sacred river, Zola felt a strange peace settle within her. She could feel the presence of her mother, near, deep within her heart, and knew this was the moment that would change everything. Zola had followed the clues that Baba Oran had reluctantly shared, the threads of knowledge that led her to this very spot, where the sacred ring lay hidden beneath the waters. The ring, once glowing with an unearthly power, had been lost for years, but now, its time had come. As she stood by the river's edge, Zola closed her eyes, offering a silent prayer to the spirits of the land and water, to the forces that had guided her thus far. With a deep breath, she plunged her hand into the cool water, her fingers brushing against the soft, smooth stone at the river's bed. She felt the ring before she saw it, a delicate object, light as a feather, yet heavy with the weight of all that had transpired. She grasped it tightly, the familiar energy of the ring pulsing through her fingertips, filling her with an overwhelming sense of purpose. This was the key. This was the magic that would set her mother free. Zola stood up, the ring clutched tightly in her hand, her golden eyes filled with both determination and love. She had come so far, and nothing would stop her now. The journey back to the forest was swift, the world around her seemingly falling into place as if the universe itself was guiding her forward. Zola's heart beat in rhythm with the energy of the ring, which seemed to glow brighter the closer she got to the place where she had first encountered the serpent. When she finally reached the clearing, the serpent, Nia, was waiting, its massive, shimmering body coiled beneath the trees, its golden eyes fixed on Zola as she approached. The serpent did not move, did not speak, but there was something in its gaze, a quiet yearning, a hope that was felt deep within Zola's soul. She was here, at last, to set her mother free. Without hesitation, Zola knelt before the serpent, holding the ring in both hands, her heart swelling with emotion. As she placed the ring upon the serpent's forehead, the air around them seemed to hum with energy. A soft, radiant glow began to emanate from the ring, growing brighter and brighter with each passing moment, until it consumed them both in a brilliant flash of light. The light was blinding, and Zola had to shield her eyes, her breath caught in her chest. But as the light began to fade, she saw something incredible, something that took her breath away. Before her, no longer a serpent, stood Nia. Her human form had been restored, the magic that had bound her broken. Nia's eyes, those golden, radiant eyes, now looked at her with tears streaming down her face, a look of overwhelming love and relief. Nia's hands trembled as she reached out, her voice barely a whisper. "Zola, my daughter. I'm home. I'm truly home." Zola, unable to hold back her own tears, ran to her mother, her arms wrapping tightly around Nia as they embraced for the first time in years. The years of separation, of sorrow and longing, melted away in that moment. The mother and daughter, reunited at last, wept together, their tears blending with the morning dew that gathered around them. They had both endured so much, but now, in each other's arms, they were whole again. The journey back to the village was a quiet one, the world around them filled with a newfound peace. Nia and Zola walked side by side, the bond between them stronger than ever. Nia's transformation was a miracle, but it was also a lesson, one that Zola would carry with her for the rest of her life. When they finally reached the village, they were greeted with astonished gasps. The villagers stared, wide-eyed, at the sight of Nia, no longer a serpent, but a woman. The woman they had all believed to be lost forever. Obodil, his face streaked with tears, rushed toward Nia, his arms open wide. "Nia," he cried, his voice breaking. "You've come back to me, after all these years." Nia collapsed into his arms, her heart full, her soul healed by the reunion. She had never imagined this moment would come, but now that it had, she felt complete. "I'm so sorry, Obodil," she whispered. "I never meant to leave you. I never meant to leave any of you." Obodil held her tightly, his tears falling freely as he whispered back, "You are home now. That's all that matters. You are home." The villagers, still in awe, slowly gathered around the reunited family. Nia knew that her return would bring more than just joy, it would bring a lesson. A lesson that she had learned the hard way, a lesson that needed to be shared. Nia stepped forward, her eyes scanning the crowd, her voice steady as she addressed the villagers. "I have returned," she began, her tone both soft and commanding. "But I did not return without great cost. The magic that gave me this gift was dark, and it came with a price that nearly destroyed me. I was blinded by my desire for a child, and I sought help from a priest who promised me a miracle. But that miracle was not free." The villagers listened, their eyes wide as Nia continued. "I urge you, all of you, to never seek power from dark forces. The spirits are not to be trifled with, and the gifts they offer are often poisoned with consequences. Have faith, and trust in the power of patience and love. This," she gestured to Zola, "this is the true gift. A child born of love, not of magic. A child who taught me the true meaning of sacrifice." As Nia finished speaking, a hush fell over the village. The lesson was clear, and it resonated deeply with everyone who had gathered to hear her. They understood now the true power of patience, of faith, and of love. They had witnessed a miracle, but they had also learned that miracles come at a cost. The path to redemption was not always easy, but it was worth it in the end. Far from the village, Baba Oran sat in his hideaway, his eyes flicking nervously around the room. He had known that this day would come, that Zola would eventually uncover the truth. And now, as the news of Nia's return spread through the village, he realized that his time was up. The villagers, once terrified of his power, now saw him for what he truly was, a man who had used dark magic for his own gain, a man who had caused untold suffering. And now, with Nia's return, he knew there was no place left for him. He had been defeated, and the villagers would no longer listen to his lies. With a heavy heart, Baba Oran gathered his belongings and fled, disappearing into the wilderness, never to be seen again. Years passed, and Zola grew into a wise and respected woman, known for her strength, her wisdom, and the lessons she had learned from her mother's sacrifice. She became a protector of the village, a teacher who shared her knowledge with those willing to listen. Her bond with Nia remained unbreakable, and together, they worked to ensure that the village would never forget the lessons of the past. The legend of Nia, the Serpent Mother, was passed down for generations, a tale of love, redemption, and the unbreakable bond between mother and child. It was a warning to all who heard it, a reminder of the dangers of seeking power from dark forces, and a testament to the strength of love, patience, and faith. And in the heart of the village, beneath the towering trees and the ever-flowing river, Nia and Zola lived out their days in peace, their hearts forever entwined, their story forever told. The end.